In the darkest years of human history, Egypt was the greatest and most terrifying empire in the world. Massive pyramids towered toward the sky like fingers defying heaven itself. The mighty Nile River wound its way through the golden desert. Its waters sometimes flowed red as fresh blood, sometimes deep blue, nourishing a brilliant civilization while silently swallowing countless pains and innocent lives. Pharaoh sat upon a throne of pure gold, declaring himself a living god among men. He ruled not by law, but by the whip and terror. Under his gaze, the Hebrew people grew more numerous, stronger and more resilient with each passing day. With every sunrise, the fear in Pharaoh's heart swelled like an unrelenting nightmare. "They are multiplying too quickly," he growled within the shadows of his palace. "If they rebel, my Egypt will lose everything." That fear turned into madness. He issued the most brutal command ever recorded in history. "Kill every Hebrew baby boy. Throw them all into the Nile." From that moment, the screams of innocent infants echoed throughout the mud-brick villages along both banks of the river. Mothers wailed for their children, fathers cried out in despair, and the crack of whips lashed against the flesh of those who dared resist. With every dawn, the Nile was stained with another layer of fresh red blood. The river was no longer merely a source of life. It had become a vast, silent graveyard for countless tiny souls. Yet in the midst of that thick darkness and overwhelming despair, there was one Hebrew mother named Jochebed who refused to bow before Pharaoh's death decree. She gave birth to a strong, healthy baby boy whose cry rang out with fierce vitality. For 3 long months, she hid him inside their home. Every night she held the infant close to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispering between lullabies and trembling prayers. "My son, I will not let them take you." When she could no longer hide him, her heart shattered. She carefully wove a small, sturdy basket of reeds and sealed it thoroughly with tar and pitch so it would not sink. With hands trembling from unbearable agony, she placed her precious baby boy inside, covered him gently with a thin cloth, and released the basket onto the waters of the Nile among the tall, whispering reeds. The little basket floated softly with the current, like a silent cry for help sent toward the heavens. Jochebed stood frozen on the riverbank, her heart torn into pieces. She watched her son's basket drift farther and farther away, tears flooding her eyes, yet her lips continued to whisper without ceasing, "O God of my fathers, please protect my son." Not far away, the baby's older sister, a girl of about 12 named Miriam, hid behind the reeds. Her eyes never left the small basket floating on the water. The young girl did not cry. She simply watched in silence, filled with all the courage and determination of a child ready to do anything to save her little brother. The Nile River that day became a witness to one of the most fragile and miraculous moments in the history of redemption. A mother dared to release her child into the river of death. And the Almighty, the one who sees everything, had already begun to unfold a plan that no one on earth could possibly imagine. The little basket floated gently with the current, drifting slowly among the whispering reeds. Morning sunlight sparkled on the river's surface like thousands of broken mirrors. Suddenly, cheerful voices echoed from a distance. Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, was coming down to the river with her attendants to bathe. Her silk garments swayed gracefully in the breeze. As the group drew closer, the princess suddenly stopped. Her eyes fell upon the small reed basket caught among the reeds. She signaled to her maids. One of them gently pulled the basket to the shore. The princess leaned down and opened the thin cloth covering. Immediately, the weak but lively cry of a baby rang out. Her heart softened. A strange wave of compassion rose within the daughter of the man who had ordered the death of every Hebrew baby boy. She carefully lifted the infant into her arms and gazed at his small, tear-streaked face. "This is a Hebrew child," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. At that moment, Miriam, the baby's older sister, stepped out from behind the reeds. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained calm and clever. "Shall I go and find a Hebrew nurse to care for the child, Your Highness? She will take good care of him." The princess looked at the girl, then at the crying baby in her arms. She smiled softly and nodded. "Yes, go." Miriam ran home as fast as she could, her heart overflowing with indescribable joy. Soon after, Jochebed, the mother who had just released her son into the river with a broken heart, was brought before the princess. She struggled to contain her emotions as she bowed her head and accepted the role of wet nurse for her own child. The baby was taken to the magnificent palace. There, he was raised as a true prince. He wore the finest silk, ate the most delicious food, learned hieroglyphics from the best teachers, rode chariots, wielded swords, and was respected and feared throughout the court. The princess named him Moses, meaning the one drawn out of the water. Moses grew up surrounded by luxury and glory. By day, he was an Egyptian prince, praised by everyone. But every night, as he lay in his vast bedroom with golden walls and jeweled ceilings, Moses could not sleep peacefully. From afar came the sharp sound of whips cracking across the backs of Hebrew slaves. The cries and groans of pain echoed endlessly in his mind. Even while living in a palace of gold and jewels, Moses knew one truth clearly. Hebrew blood was flowing strongly through his veins. He was not an Egyptian prince. He was the son of a people who were oppressed and suffering. One scorching hot day, when the sun blazed like fire over the desert, Moses left the palace and walked out to the massive construction site of Pharaoh. The constant crack of whips and the painful groans of Hebrew slaves echoed everywhere. The air was heavy and suffocating. Suddenly he stopped. Before his eyes, an Egyptian slave driver was brutally beating a Hebrew man with a whip. Fresh blood flowed onto the hot sand, staining the ground red. The slave collapsed, no longer able to resist. Moses looked around. No one was watching. The anger boiling in his Hebrew blood erupted. Without thinking, he rushed forward and struck the slave driver with all his strength. In a moment, the man lay motionless. Moses quickly dragged the body and buried it hastily in the hot sand, trying to hide what he had just done. The next day, Moses went out again. This time he saw two Hebrew men fighting fiercely. He stepped in to stop them, his voice full of emotion. "Why are you fighting each other? You are brothers." One of them turned sharply and looked at Moses with contempt and hostility. "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" Those words hit Moses like a bucket of cold water. His heart tightened in fear. The news had already spread. Pharaoh must have known. He realized with terror that his impulsive act had been discovered. The rumor quickly reached Pharaoh's ears. The king flew into a terrifying rage, his face flushed with fury upon learning that the very prince he had raised had dared to kill an Egyptian slave driver. Pharaoh immediately ordered his soldiers to hunt Moses down everywhere. Troops were sent across every road and every city to find and kill him. Moses had no choice left. He fled. He abandoned the magnificent palace, abandoned the title of prince that the entire nation once respected, and left behind all the glory and luxury he had known. Alone, he ran into the vast and harsh desert of Midian. He ran and ran until he was utterly exhausted, his lips cracked with thirst and his feet bleeding from sharp rocks and burning sand. Finally, he collapsed beside a well. At that moment, the 7 daughters of Reuel, also known as Jethro, the priest of Midian, had brought their father's flock to drink water. Other shepherds were bullying them and refusing to let them water their sheep. Though exhausted, Moses stood up, drove away the bullies, and personally watered the flock for the sisters. When the girls returned home and told their father what had happened, Jethro asked in surprise, "Where is the man? Why didn't you invite him to come home and eat with us?" Jethro welcomed Moses warmly and invited him to stay in his house. Not long after, he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. From then on, Moses became an ordinary shepherd in the vast desert. 40 long years passed. His hair turned white from the desert wind and scorching sun. His hands became calloused from holding the shepherd's staff day after day. His face grew weathered and lined with deep wrinkles. Moses thought his life had ended here, an unknown fugitive, living quietly in the wilderness, forever separated from Egypt and his own people. He had no idea that God was preparing a divine encounter that would forever change his destiny and the fate of the entire Hebrew nation. One late afternoon, as the golden sunlight began to soften, Moses led his flock of sheep to the foot of Mount Horeb. The vast desert was quiet, with only the whispering wind and the gentle bleating of the sheep. Suddenly he stopped. Before his eyes a bush was burning fiercely. The flames blazed bright orange and red, beautiful and strange. But the most astonishing thing was that the bush was on fire, yet not consumed. The leaves remained green, the branches untouched, as if the fire were dancing upon the bush without harming it. Filled with curiosity, Moses stepped closer. From within the burning bush, a voice rang out, clear, majestic, and full of power. "Moses, Moses!" Trembling, he answered, "Here I am." The voice of the Lord continued, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Moses immediately covered his face, shaking with fear and awe. He dared not look up. The Lord spoke again, his voice filled with compassion. "I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of suffering. I know their pain. Therefore I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." Moses stammered, his voice trembling with fear. "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? I am only an ordinary shepherd. I am not eloquent. Who will listen to me?" The Lord replied with firm authority, "I will be with you. I will not leave you alone. I will give you signs to prove that I have sent you. Take the staff in your hand." Moses picked up his staff. The Lord commanded, "Throw it on the ground." As soon as the staff touched the earth, it turned into a large snake. Moses jumped back in fear. The Lord told him to reach out and take it by the tail. When he obeyed, the snake became a staff again in his hand. The Lord continued, "Now put your hand inside your cloak." Moses did as he was told. When he pulled his hand out, it was covered with leprosy, white as snow. He was horrified. The Lord told him to put his hand back inside his cloak. This time, when he drew it out, his hand was completely healed and healthy again. "And if they still do not believe," the Lord said, "take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. It will turn into blood." Even after seeing these miracles, Moses still hesitated. He knelt down and pleaded, "O Lord, please send someone else. I am not a man of words." Then the Lord became angry, yet he remained patient and said, "Very well, I will send your brother Aaron to be your spokesman. You will tell Aaron what I command you, and he will speak for you before Pharaoh." Moses fell to the ground, tears streaming down his weathered face. After 40 long years of exile, he finally bowed his head and accepted the mission God had given him. He stood up, still gripping the staff tightly in his hand. His heart was filled with fear, but also with a strange new strength. The journey to lead the Israelites out of Egypt was about to begin. After 40 long years of exile in the desert, Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt. They met with the elders of Israel and told them everything the Lord had said. They performed the miraculous signs before them. The staff turned into a snake. The hand became leprous and then was healed. Seeing these signs, the people's hearts filled with hope and faith. They bowed down and worshipped God, whispering through their tears, He has visited his people. He has heard our cries." Then the two brothers entered the magnificent palace and stood before Pharaoh's glorious throne. The air in the great hall was heavy with power and danger. Moses lifted his head and declared in a clear, ringing voice, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may go into the wilderness 3 days' journey to offer sacrifices to me." Pharaoh threw back his head and laughed loudly, his laughter full of contempt and arrogance echoing through the palace. He looked at Moses and Aaron with eyes full of scorn. "Who is the Lord that I should obey him? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let your people go." He paused for a moment, then gave his command in a cold and cruel voice. "From now on, you shall no longer supply straw to the Hebrews to make bricks. Let them go and gather straw for themselves wherever they can, but they must still produce the same number of bricks as before. They are lazy. That is why they cry out to go and sacrifice. Make their work even harder." The order was like a sharp knife stabbing into the heart of Israel. From that day, their suffering multiplied. They had to run across the field searching for dry straw while still being beaten. Many collapsed from exhaustion. The people were in utter despair. They came to Moses and Aaron, blaming them bitterly. "What have you done to us? You have made Pharaoh hate us even more. Now we are suffering worse than before. You have brought disaster upon us." Moses was deeply pained. Their words cut like a knife into his heart. He turned away and prayed alone to the Lord, his voice filled with sorrow and confusion. "O Lord, why did you send me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh, your people have only suffered more." The Lord answered with power and certainty, "Now you will see what I will do. I will act with my strong hand against Pharaoh. I will perform great signs and bring terrible plagues, so that he will be forced to let my people go. Pharaoh will know that I am the Lord." God began to send terrifying plagues upon Egypt. The first plague: Moses raised his staff and struck the Nile River right before Pharaoh. The entire river instantly turned into blood. Fish died and floated to the surface, covering the water in white. A foul stench spread throughout the land. The Egyptians could not drink a single drop of water. Pharaoh's face turned pale, but his heart remained as hard as stone. The second plague: frogs came up from the river like a living flood. They invaded everywhere into the palace, onto Pharaoh's bed, into the kitchens, even jumping onto his own body. In panic, Pharaoh promised to let the Israelites go, but when Moses prayed and the frogs died, he immediately broke his word. The third plague: gnats swarmed in thick black clouds, biting people and animals everywhere. The Egyptian magicians were terrified and cried out, "This is the finger of God!" Yet Pharaoh still refused to yield. The fourth plague: swarms of flies filled the sky, covering the land of Egypt. They flew into houses and crawled over people. Only the region of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, was completely free of flies. Pharaoh promised again, then broke his promise once more. The fifth plague: a deadly disease struck livestock. Horses, cattle, camels, sheep, and goats died in massive numbers. Only the livestock of the Israelites remained untouched. Still, Pharaoh's heart stayed hard. The sixth plague: painful, horrible boils broke out on the bodies of the Egyptians and their animals. The magicians could not even stand before Moses and Aaron because of the scores. Even so, Pharaoh would not let the people go. The seventh plague: a terrifying hailstorm of fire rained down. Thunder roared across the sky as huge stones the size of fists smashed down, killing people and animals in the fields. The wheat and barley crops were destroyed. For the first time, Pharaoh was truly afraid. He ran to Moses and begged, "Pray for me." But when the hail stopped, his heart hardened again. The eighth plague: locusts flew in like a massive black cloud, devouring everything that remained of the crops. Pharaoh begged Moses to pray and promised to release the Israelites, but as soon as the locusts disappeared, he changed his mind once more. The ninth plague. Thick darkness covered all of Egypt for 3 days and 3 nights. People could not see one another, and no one dared leave their place. The whole land of Egypt was plunged into terror. But in the land of Goshen, every Israelite home was filled with light. Pharaoh roared in desperation, "Go, but you must leave your sheep and cattle behind." Moses replied firmly, "We cannot. We must take everything with us to offer sacrifices to the Lord." Then came the 10th plague, the most horrifying of all. The Lord instructed Moses about the Passover. Each Israelite family was to choose a 1-year-old lamb without defect, kill it in the evening, and put its blood on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of their house. They were to eat the roasted lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, eating in haste. That night the destroying angel of the Lord passed through the land of Egypt. Every firstborn son, from Pharaoh's own son to the son of the lowest prisoner, died in an instant. Cries of anguish rose up throughout the land. There was not a single Egyptian house without someone dead. Pharaoh held the body of his firstborn son in his arms, tears streaming down his face, his body trembling as he collapsed in complete defeat. His voice broke with pain and terror. "Go, take your people and leave my country immediately, and bless me also." That night, the Israelites hurriedly left Egypt in the darkness. More than 2 million people, young and old, men and women, set out together, carrying unleavened bread still warm in their hands and loaded with gold, silver, and goods that the Egyptians had given them as compensation. The cries of children, calls to one another, and the constant sound of footsteps echoed across the land. They left in a mixture of fear and hope, without time to take even the things they had stored for years. But Pharaoh changed his mind once again. His final rage exploded violently. He could not accept losing millions of slaves and vast wealth. He immediately gathered 600 of his finest chariots and his entire elite army, then personally led them in pursuit of the Israelites. The people had just reached the shore of the Red Sea when Pharaoh's army caught up with them. They were trapped between the deep sea ahead and the powerful army behind. The thunder of hooves, the clashing of weapons, and Pharaoh's furious shouts echoed loudly. The Israelites were thrown into utter panic. They turned to Moses and cried out in despair, "We are going to die. It would have been better to remain slaves in Egypt than to die here in the wilderness." Moses stood firm amid the howling wind and the approaching sound of hooves. His voice rang out strong, full of power and faith. "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation that the Lord will accomplish for you today. You will never see the Egyptians again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." He raised his staff high toward the sky. A strong east wind blew all night. The waters of the sea began to part. 2 towering walls of water stood upright on either side, and between them lay a dry path cutting straight through the sea. The Israelites walked across on firm, dry ground, as if walking on a plain. Children shouted with joy, the elderly wept with gladness, and the entire nation crossed the Red Sea in awe and worship. When all the Israelites had safely reached the other side, the Egyptian army charged furiously onto the dry path. Chariots, soldiers, and the proud Pharaoh all pursued them. But once they were in the middle of the sea, Moses raised his staff once more. The waters of the sea suddenly crashed down like a massive flood. The 2 walls of water collapsed, swallowing the entire Egyptian army. Chariots overturned, soldiers screamed in desperation, and the arrogant Pharaoh was buried deep beneath the waves. In a single moment, the mighty army vanished completely. All that remained was the roaring sound of the waves and the victorious song rising from the opposite shore. The Israelites stood on the bank, looking down at the now peaceful sea, tears streaming down their faces. They lifted their voices in triumphant worship. "The Lord is victorious. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea." On the shore of the Red Sea, as the waves still whispered the story of victory, Moses and all Israel lifted their voices in a mighty song that echoed across the vast desert. The Lord is victorious. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. He is our strength, our song, and our God. That song was more than praise. It was a declaration of war against every chain and a shout of joy from a people who had finally tasted true freedom after 400 years of slavery. Pharaoh's final rage had vanished forever beneath the deep waters. Meanwhile, the Israelites, their hearts still pounding with awe, stepped into the journey of freedom, led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, heading toward the promised land that God had prepared long ago. This story of deliverance is not just an ancient page in history. It is still alive and unfolding in your life today. If you are being held captive by any Pharaoh, whether it is sin that binds you, fear that controls you, destructive habits that rule you, past pain, repeated failure, or any power that weighs heavily upon your life, then listen carefully. God is still speaking these words directly to you. Let my people go. He still sees your suffering. He still hears the silent cries of your heart, and he is still ready to send plagues against everything that holds you back, to open a path through the Red Sea of your impossible situation. He can turn a burning bush into a flame that calls you forward. He can take a fearful shepherd in the desert and turn him into a deliverer. And he can still part the roaring waves of your life. You don't need to be strong. You don't need to be worthy. You only need to dare to believe, to stand up, and to take that first step. Because the one who parted the Red Sea is still alive. The one who transformed Moses is still waiting for you. And the one who led his people into the promised land is still calling you today. Come out of the Egypt of your life, walk through the Red Sea of your circumstances, and let me lead you into true freedom, the kind that nothing in this world can ever take away. The Lord is still waiting for your answer.